how do people really learn? At Newspring, we create experiences with leading learning pioneers like Dr. Felipe Hartman, Julie Dirksen, and Lauren Waldman to explore just that and more. Don't miss our next Love to Learn experience, an event series to help and inspire you to create training based on how people learn best. Find out what's coming up at newspring.com/events.
If you're in workplace learning, Learning Technologies 2025 should definitely be on your radar. It's happening 23rd to 24th of April at Excel London, and the scale is huge. 11,000 visitors, 1,000 conference delegates, and a free exhibition with over 200 L&D solution suppliers. The conference theme, People, Technology, and the Future, Decision Time, taps into the biggest topics in L&D right now. With 80 expert speakers and 30 sessions, they'll cover AI, skills, personal growth, and practical L&D essentials. Booking opens at the end of January. Check out learningtechnologies.co.uk for more info. Welcome to a new season of The Learning Hack and our first episode of the new year. We're taking one step back and 4 steps forward this time as we bring you an exclusive report from the Online Educa conference in Berlin, which we went to in November. Along with visits to the Christmas markets and walks in the Tiergarten, we talked to 4 of the leading minds in learning and education. Here's what they told us to expect from the year ahead and the years after that. Welcome to The Learning Hack, a podcast about the people and technologies that are creating the future of learning. I'm John Helmer.
Now guess what?
Learning is cool. Learning is cool. Learning is cool. I'm learning.
Learning is fun.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge. Education.
Online Educa is pretty unique in learning events because it crosses that borderline between workplace learning and the education system. It brings together 2 very different worlds in doing that don't always speak the same language. But if truth be known, there's a lot they can learn from each other. You'll hear interviews with German futurist Gerd Leonhard, Maribel Reyes-Millán from Mexico, and old friends at the podcast Don Taylor and the always interesting Laura Overton. Hack Facts. Gerd Leonhard is a renowned futurist, keynote speaker and author specialising in technology, society and humanity's future. Based in Germany, his work bridges technology and human-centric values, offering insights on AI, digital ethics, and sustainable innovation. Say hi, it's great to have you on the podcast.
Yes, great to be here. Thank you.
Welcome to The Learning Hack. Really enjoyed the keynote you've just given us. But I had this question. A biologist studies animals and plants that can be observed, dissected, put under the microscope. A psychologist studies human behavior. You can put people in MRIs and so forth nowadays. But again, it's observable. You're billed as a futurist and you study something, the future, that doesn't exist yet. How do you study something that doesn't exist?
Yeah, I mean, my work, I'm a little bit different in that my work as a futurist is mostly about observation, not about prediction. So if you observe a lot and you look at things from all different angles, you talk to people, you can develop sort of an insight or foresight that ranges between 5 and 10 years. You can say, okay, the end of oil is coming, or, we're switching to different kinds of computer interfaces or those kind of things. So my work is really about developing hunches, And most people could do that. So it's kind of obvious. Like I wrote a book about the future of music in 2004, and it talked about music like water, which became Spotify, because it was obvious, right? Yeah. So a lot of my work is really quite obvious if you take the time to look.
Yeah.
Like many scientists, I'm not a scientist, but many scientists cannot discover the obvious, but then they explain it well, right? So my work is also about explaining in breaking the news to people who kind of know it, like a therapist, but they haven't faced it yet. So the future as such, you can't know the future, but you can get hunches on immediate futures.
Yeah, so you observe what's going on now. You probably got more information coming out in about that than most people and you kind of draw lines forward into the future.
Well, if you're here today and you're looking at what's happening with artificial intelligence, you can kind of extrapolate from what's happening today and say, okay, probably by 2030, we will have the possibility of a general intelligent being, if you're looking at the exponential curve, and like Kurzweil does, and you can kind of anticipate what will happen by then.
Right. Yeah. How do you kind of avoid the tendency that comes up a lot with the future, where I'm thinking if you look back to the kind of the future of the 1930s or the future of the 1950s, you think of Fritz Lang's Metropolis or 1984 or the Jetsons. Each of those things now seems to really reflect the styles and mores of its era. So we have a 1930s future, a 1950s future. It is what we're how do you avoid painting what is now a kind of 2024 future, which in 50 years' time might look quaint and a genre piece?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the ultimate answer for me is that what we try to create is with what my team does and me is to create the preferred future. Right. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at possible options and we say, okay, since we make the future doesn't just fall down on us. We create it. So we create the future we prefer. And if we prefer a future that includes humans becoming machines, like some people do in Silicon Valley, then this is what we set about to do. Mm-hmm. So this is really about trying to understand the possibilities and making decisions and checking with what feels best for you as the preferred future. And this has, of course, a lot of policy and political angles. Yeah. As to, these days, all technology is political. Yeah. Right? So there's a huge political ramification. For example, if you're a techno-optimist, you don't want regulation. If you're a humanist, you want regulation. Yeah. So these are the obvious things that make it hard. And how do you avoid that sort of, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it was pretty easy to talk about the future because you had an obvious scenario that wasn't here. But today, most of the future is already here. Yeah. It's just not, we don't recognize it as being the definitive. Yeah. Like, there are machines that can talk. There are robots that you can marry. There's pet robots, there's dogs, and all, we recognize it's possible, right? But it's unevenly distributed, as William. Right. And then we have to say, okay, which ones of those do we think is a good idea? Is it a good idea to have a person that looks like a human as a robot, like the TV show Humans? Yes. Right? Or Black Mirror. Right? Yeah. My view of it has always been that, narratives in the future tend to be of two types. One is kind of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. It runs wild and takes us over and it's our robot overlords. And the other one is make your own girlfriend. There's two scenarios that are very popular. One is the utopian, which is like we're going to be in nirvana because we have technology. The other one is dystopian, which is Hollywood, saying that it's all going to hell and we're all going to die. Okay, and I'm with this faction of people that call it protopia, which is Kevin Kelly's term from Wired magazine, who says that we're moving into a better future, but it's a step-by-step process. Yeah, so fixing stuff, looking for more solutions, working on what we need to do, like a pro topic, like not the idea of doom or not doom, Yes. Which is very limited to kind of your television shows and areas. It's quite careful phrasing. And I know when you said the preferred future, right? It's not a utopia because utopias we know are too often. They don't happen. One person's utopia is it's like the utopia of the heaven. Hegelian, and then you might believe it. And they actually never happen. Yeah. And dystopia is the default because it's easy to speak badly. Yes. And say we're going to die. This is very easy to say. Yeah. Because it's obvious that yes, we could die. Yeah. But maybe one person's utopia is another person's dystopia. Also, right. So protopia means let's fix the things that we can do and address everything so that we can get on the same page. Because clearly by 2050, we're going to travel into other planets. We're going to fix cancer. We're going to solve energy, many, many good things. Or we're going to have a machine-dominated society. We know there are a lot of fears around about the future now largely because of AI, a lot in this community of learning people. You talk to a lot of people in various countries, various industries about the future that tech's creating for us.
And you must get a lot of the optimism from people. They're quite optimistic crowd today. And also a lot of anxiety. So we know a lot of these people here will be anxious about it. But how does that fuel mix vary from country to country, from sector to sector? Are some more scared than others? Where are the fears bigger? You must had a good comparative sort of.
There's a very big difference. I mean, Americans are very up or down, extreme. Right?
Yeah.
So if you're techno-optimist, you'll be really optimistic about solving everything. If you are religious, from the middle of America, you kind of look at doom scenarios. You want to close up, Yeah. The same is true in Germany. So in Germany, we have extreme sensitivity on data and privacy and autocrats and that sort of thing. So we have that fear. In Switzerland, is about avoiding all risk.
Yeah.
We want to be safe and rich. And that's pretty much all that matters. Indians are very optimistic. Brazilians are very optimistic despite everything that happens. So generally speaking, the southern part of the globe is more optimistic because they have more of a way to go. They have a longer runway. Or Eastern Europe, if you're in Poland or Hungary, because you hadn't had much until now,
right?
You have this open space that says maybe we can be the next Germany,
Yeah.
And Germans are the opposite. They're like, oh my God, our best time is behind us.
Yeah.
And so,
and if you're Swiss, you're kind of sitting on this pile of money.
Right. And a lot of millennials, younger people, they are extremely anxious because they went through COVID where everything fell apart.
Yeah.
Now they're facing geopolitical strife, wars, climate change emergency, and they don't feel very optimistic about everything that's going back, right?
Yes.
If you flip it and say, let's look at all the things that are good, there's 100 things,
yes,
right, that we could feel great about, but they have to be orchestrated in such a way where they are actually a benefit.
Yeah.
Like if we're going to solve cancer, which we can using genetic engineering, probably 10, 15, 20 years time frame, fantastic. But we can use that technology to build super soldiers.
Yes.
Yeah. And so if we build super soldiers, we die. If we fix cancer, we live. So we have to start prioritizing the long-term vision over sort of immediate effects like, can I sell more software when it has AI? That sort of thing. And we tend to be very myopic in this sense. Like they say, okay, this tool will be better using AI and therefore, we get more money, or we can sell more ads or whatever it is.
Yeah. You talked a bit about Spotify earlier. You have a musical background, you studied at Berkeley. I have a musical background. I have a daughter studying at a music conservatoire in London. I'm a big fan of Spotify. I love it. All the music I could possibly listen to there, on whim, just kind of change to listen to something else until I look at my royalty statements. And they've just kind of gone over the last years. And you hear of kind of middle-sized music venues just closing down in droves. Musicians just can't make money out of music anymore unless you're Taylor Swift or, Kanye West.
Not even then.
Yeah, and you know about this, and you also with the stuff that you talk about. How do you reflect on what that's done to this particular creative, artistic sector about the growth of digital and of AI and looking at?
Well, this is a big topic. First, of course, the music industry is a super Darwinistic system.
Yeah.
And it's always Rolls-Royce or bicycles. That's always been true. That's the nature of creative work is like that.
Yeah.
And so musicians have never done well except for a few. And that is the nature of what you do as a creative.
Up to a point, except that there have always been these kind of thriving avant-garde scenes, in Berlin, for example, great example of that.
These scenes still exist. They still exist.
Yeah.
But the monetization is more on a different level of doing gigs or shows or sponsorships.
Well, the money, this is the part I'm driving to really is the money is all in kind of performing and merch. For actual, the value of content has just been driven down and down. The people who create content, there just doesn't seem to be, and this is tougher for writers in a way. I think mid-list authors used to be a species and they're kind of disappearing. I mean, how do we...
Digital Darwinism, right?
Yeah.
It's a polarization. So we solved the distribution problem. Anybody can distribute music, which means we have a problem with attention. because then you're competing with another million Kindle writers or musicians for that matter. And so it's really now moved from the game of distribution, like, what record label do you have, yada, yada, and where can they buy your record, to the question of attention.
Yeah.
And attention is much harder to orchestrate than distribution. So you can't just make a deal with Sony Music and have attention. You don't get attention. You get it on YouTube now or wherever, right? So that makes it even more Darwinistic, whether that's subject to technology or not. But in many ways, you could say the internet has brought us many good things, but also many bad things in that regard, that it has made it more Darwinistic. We had this sort of artificial economy of record labels and CDs, which you had to first get to, so that you can be part of that. Yeah. And now everybody is part of it, but also means everybody shares the money. Yeah. And also not to forget that there is no worse economic setup than the music business. It's the worst case, really, of all.
Tell me about it.
We have monopolies. We have people who don't know anything about anything. We have 4 guys running most of the world's recorded music. We have ancient copyright laws that don't, this whole streaming versus download, it's like totally ridiculous, right? And people don't collaborate. It's the most egotistic system that you can imagine. Even the movie industry is better.
Yeah.
Right? So therefore, I'm not surprised that it isn't working, and it's not really the fault of Spotify. Spotify pays 74% or so of their revenues to the labels, who keep it because the artists haven't recouped.
Yeah.
So this whole logic is just so utterly dysfunctional. It would take a year of therapists every day to look at how that can be taken apart.
Yeah. Train as a lawyer, as a doctor, or an AI programmer. Well, not a programmer, an AI entrepreneur. Kids, don't put that guitar away.
But to me, it's like, I think the value of being creative has its own value, because it generates things within you that may ultimately turn into a job or into money. But also, like happened with me, my mission of being a musician and writer turned into something I had to do for money.
Yeah.
Which I didn't like. Yeah. So it made me think about how much I can make on the gig.
Yes.
Or so. And it became a job. And then I said, I don't want a job, I want something that goes beyond a job. I never did music to do a job,
Yes.
And so I said, okay, never mind. I don't want this job. I can do another job and just keep with the music.
Yes. Well, that's interesting that you coach it through that way. But my experience was years as a gigging musician. When I actually got a proper job, I found I was much more organized than the people around me.
Yeah, because you're used to the pressure of getting organized.
Oh, yeah.
I always find that musicians and artists in general, they're much better at complex scenarios and challenges.
Yeah.
Because they've been through all of that. And that's one of the benefits of being an artist. You've been through all that crap, right? So you know how that works. And if you're doing a startup, it's kind of the same thing in a band.
Yes.
And so that's something to learn from,
Yeah. Talk to you all day about this, I think. But one question that I think is a really big one and that people will have is, who is the futurist? Who do you follow? Who do you trust, so that people have other sources that you could recommend to them?
Yeah, with that, I really do take it from everywhere. I'm a fan, of course, of the old school futurists that I studied when I got started. Alvin Toffler, Arthur C. Clarke, Buckminster Fuller, those kind of mostly Anglo authors, that I
all black guys,
Yeah. There weren't many women. There were, but they were hard to find. But like Barbara Hubbard and others, they were around. But, I think we all draw from those guys who were brilliant, like Arthur C. Clarke or Buckminster Fuller. We still talk about the fork in the road and the global consciousness and all the, those are the classics. But today we draw from sources like everywhere. Great writers and great magazines, great podcasts, and we kind of cook this mixing thing, that becomes how I do this. Right?
Yeah.
So and this is another reason of this sort of fragmentation.
Yes.
We have an utter fragmentation. So I'll be looking at stuff that nobody else even exists.
Yeah.
Right. That knows that it exists. So it's kind of like on its own. It's a little bit different than it was in the 70s or 80s, when you had clear paths. If you were an architect, you study Bauhaus, or, you'd have certain processes. And today it's very much like very freewheeling.
Yeah. I've a friend called Esri Kohlebach, friend of the podcast, who does a lot of study of science fiction, who's very interested in that. Do you find that a useful input to being a futurist?
Right. I mean, I love science fiction, but I often find the fantasy part to be, if you confuse that with reality, then it's difficult to explain.
Yeah.
Because one of my main jobs is to explain. So I'm trying to explain how AI works and what that does to us, to them. In science fiction, isn't that helpful there because it doesn't have any limits.
Yeah.
Right. And as soon as you quote, we're all polluted by Netflix and Apple TV and Amazon Prime and what have you. We're polluted by the stuff they put out because they put out all this cookie cutter stuff.
Yeah.
So they talk about robots and the work. Well, they're going to come and, take our work and then they'll eat our flesh, and this is kind of like, it's very cookie cutter, except for maybe Star Trek. Everything is don't look up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all like, or Black Mirror. It's supposed to entertain, but it doesn't, from this fact of entertainment, it's very hard to take a leap into action. Yeah. Like the movie Her kind of did this.
Yeah.
Just like Paris, Texas, or Thelma and Louise, those kind of classics, right? But Blade Runner did the first one, but there's very few science fiction stories that take the leap into translating into action.
Yeah. That's interesting. I know you have other things to get on to. I've really valued you giving us this bit of time. Thanks very much, Rebecca.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Cheers. If you're looking to connect with the top minds in learning and talent, there's no better place than an iVentive event. That's IVENTIV. Since 2009, they've hosted nearly 300 interactive conversational events exclusively for senior leaders like global heads of learning. I've been a sponsor myself and found these events invaluable. Less about sitting and listening, more about real, impactful conversations. It's an unmatched opportunity to collaborate with leading chief learning officers on the challenges they're tackling today. Join the conversation. Visit iventive.com/learninghack. That's iventive.com/learninghack. Hack Facts. Laura Overton is a globally recognised workplace learning expert, analyst and author. She founded Towards Maturity, providing research-based strategies for learning and development. Laura champions evidence-based approaches to improve workforce learning impact and organisational performance. So hi Laura, great to have you back on the podcast.
So excited.
Welcome to the Learning Hack.
Thank you.
So yesterday at the pre-conference, you chaired a day-long workshop on shaping the future of work. It was a bit exhausting.
Yes, it was, but it's a big topic.
The speech exchange, mentioned the sponsor. What did you and your fellow panelists tell people about the future of work? Key points. And perhaps just as importantly, what did they tell you?
Well, it was really interesting. It's a hybrid event that we have. So this exchange of ideas is actually really important to us. So we did have a number of contributors coming in. Laurie Knowles-Hoffman came in from Vancouver. We had Mark Saunders talking to us. Yeah. We had some great practitioners being involved with us. We had Julia from the International Coaching Federation in Germany. Yeah. And a number of technical edtech vendors as well. Yeah. So everyone was sharing their view, and the way we go through our day is that we start with the bigger picture. So Laurie was really able to kind of share with us the kind of implications of AI coming into the workplace, maybe some of the challenges that may happen there, but also how vital it is for us to be able to identify what kind of tasks and jobs that we need to be doing versus the AI. Yeah. So that was quite good, linking into the skills-based organisation. But then we looked practically about how the practitioners were helping to shape individuals' behaviour now, and we had some great examples of that. But for me, the Speaks Exchange is always useful because in the afternoon we always focus on the individual in the room and what we can do. And so we looked at our intent and turning our wishes and our dreams into intentions and into action, which is vital for us to have more agency in the world of work.
Yeah.
So we had great contributors, but there was this ongoing flow of conversation between the in-room and online audience. There were about 400 people in total. So we were asking them, what does the future of work look like to you?
Yeah.
And it was a real balance.
What does it look like? I mean, there's a very high caliber panel, both very, very good people and know what they're talking about. But what came back
from the audience?
Yeah.
The audience was so interesting because we asked them about what they thought about the future of work. And it was a real mix of emotion, excitement, fear, uncertainty, opportunity, digital, human. It was all those paradoxes and those tensions in that future of not knowing where the future is going.
Yeah.
But then when we asked them to describe what a successful future of work would look like for them, fabulous things came out, purposeful, meaningful work.
Yeah.
And that really tied in with what Laurie was talking to us about as well. When the technology's coming in, it needs to release this for that purposeful work. And this was something that was really coming back from the audience. And our ability to adapt, to change, to flex, were all real vital elements of how we define the future of work. Because we don't know what the tasks and jobs are going to be.
Yeah.
But our response to those and how we live and work within that environment seemed to be a really strong theme for the audience to want to dig into.
And how much was it looking ahead at things that are going to happen as opposed to things that are actually happening now in their daily work lives that are already beginning to impact them? Did you get much sense of things going on there now?
Yeah, so our whole day funnels down the big picture with Laurie, but then those practical ideas. We had Geraldine, who's from Bronkhurst, really share with us what was going on in their organisation and how little pockets of AI interest were bubbling up, and how as a learning leader she was learning how to capture that and harness the knowledge and the ideas and the experimentation that was going on already in the organisation in order to be able to amplify that and share knowledge together. So, seen from the past, John, that social learning was kicking in massively and helping them make sense of the change that was going on.
Right.
We had James Swift come and talk with us from Leighton about how they were training up their frontline staff and how they were building skills to do various tasks and how they were using AI to actually track the conversations the frontline staff were using so they could flag what kind of issues were actually needing to be addressed by their coaching. So really practical ways of seeing how skills, tasks, tools, technologies, support, coaching are all interlinking now to help people navigate into a future that is changing.
Any stories about things that had kind of taken them by surprise, maybe crept up on them, like, oh no, we just lost that entire department because of AI or things like that?
Not amongst people yesterday, not yet.
Right.
Not yet, but this willingness and preparedness that may happen. And I think there was more a sense of let's become comfortable with why that may happen and why it may be good for us. And there was more of that kind of conversation, sort of the drudgery tasks that we have to do.
Yeah.
The fact that those, if they are set to one side, it might release us into doing something new and fresh.
Yeah.
So I think there was more a sense the day was about us preparing for having more agency in that space rather than being a victim.
We're not going to be able to do that anymore, but on the other hand, we're quite glad that we don't have to do that anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah, a bit of that. Really on that subject, more recently I saw you keynoting at an event in London for the Wonderful Learning Network on the theme of disruption. There's a whole day of talks about disruption, mainly as a positive force, with no mention of the massive disruptions happening in geopolitics right now. It was a couple of days after the US election, and the US not be named was not named, and I found that a bit extraordinary in a way, because disruption really is messy, isn't it, in the real world? When you move fast and break things, people get broken too.
Yeah.
Jobs go. There is sort of a price to be paid for that, and L&D could end up being on the receiving end of that. So should we be taking perhaps a more clear-eyed and realistic view, without becoming doomers, maybe a more realistic view of what disruption is really about? It's not all a great thing, is it, disruption?
Yeah, absolutely.
At my age.
You're the disruptor now, John.
Oh, yeah, but Michel Hussein has just left the Today programme. How am I going to cope with that? I'm joking.
Yeah, you'll be
serious subject.
You'll be fine. No, I think, you know, when I was looking at preparing for that talk, you always love to go back to the origin of words. And, you know, the disruption word comes from a Latin word about breaking things apart. And sometimes that's intentional, as well as often we think about disruption as being something that's done to us. And for us to disrupt our thinking is important as well. But the stuff that's being done to us, I think, you know, I think I touched on the kind of the geopolitical, the society disruption, the technology, the digital disruptions. But I think one of the challenges is that when we just constantly look at this as being something that is being done to us, we can become very much a victim. So I agree with you that this is very traumatic for many people. And I think the whole of the conference that we wanted to say, actually, where can we have agency? Where can we leverage that? Because certainly in my own research, what I've found is when things have got messy, when things have got broken, you can look at it in two ways. You either put the umbrella up and think, oh my goodness, what's happened? I just lost my job. I've just lost my funding. You know, work with a lot of charities, you know, and the volunteers are under stress. You know, they've got real problems with cost of living. It's impacting donations in. But what I see in some of the charities is that pressure sometimes releases a level of creativity. When things are taken away and they're left with something different, how does that release them into something new? And I think for me, the messiness of disruption creates a level of energy about it. And if we can make ourselves in the right place, sometimes we can catch that energy. Sometimes we need that support network. But what does it release in us? What opportunities can it release in us as well? And I think that was really the theme of the day.
So it's just occurred to me, so it's probably a bit of an off-the-wall question, but does disruption place extra tensions on that kind of HR and L&D dynamic? In other words, L&D and HR have kind of relationships together, which, you know, work in the way they work in organizations. My kind of experience of disruptive change within an organization is that if something a bit bad's going to happen, HR is in the room with the top team, and it's, you know, damage limitation, it's, okay, we want you to tell these people they've got to go home, or they're, you know, some other big change, HR gets involved in on that level. L&D maybe not so much, unless it's isn't, you know, change for L&D teams might perhaps be more about big disruptive changes, which are nevertheless change programs. So
yes, I mean, I think if HR are always involved in those things, making change happen to other people, you know, they're always slightly in control. And I think the world around us now, and I don't know whether you've seen it with your guests, but there is more uncertainty for everybody. The type of disruption that you've been talking about means, you know, are our business models being disrupted? Are our competitors disrupting us? The talent war for talent, to what extent is that breaking the original plans and the original trajectory? And I think historically, with the way that work has been designed, it's been designed very much from an industrial age. You know, we do this, as long as we do all of these things along the supply chain and we get the right processes in place, we'll end up where we want to be. And I think what disruption is showing us is a reality that we've always been in, which is actually the world that we work in with HR and L&D people is actually a continually complex and continually changing world. Anyway, just to stand still when you're working with human beings, there's continual change. So I think that HR historically have tried to maybe control that through their processes, through their change management, through their initiatives. But all of us now are waking up to the reality that there isn't as much that we can control, that we can predict, even with our data. But what we need to be doing as an HR and L&D function is learning to anticipate what may be there and be in preparation for that. But I think probably traditional HR, traditional L&D, when this change comes, they're going to do what most people do: hunker down, shout loud, say that you're the one in the right, and hope that you're not going to be cut.
Yeah.
I personally feel that what I'm seeing is that we're going to need a more silo-free people function.
Yeah.
Where we say, actually, it's the business and the people in the business that are important. How do we combine all of our experiences in order to help them anticipate the unknown and be ready for it?
Yes, because you might, with disruptive change, you might not need to have a change program. You might need to pivot.
Yeah.
And you need the agility to be able to do that.
And to know when to keep stability for a group and how to keep stability whilst change is going on without them being entrenched in the past and then snapped and broken and left behind. It's going to need a switched on people function who are willing to maybe question the way that they have done things in the past, because they have been developed, the models that we've had have been developed in a much more predictable age.
Yeah.
And we're going to need to learn how to even deconstruct our own thinking.
Yeah.
And apply it in a new context.
Felt pretty unpredictable at the time, but
yeah.
But
then looking back, it feels like it was a preparation.
Yeah.
For what we're facing today.
Yes, times just get more and more interesting.
In the Confucius sense.
Confucius. So we've known each other for a while, and obviously I've admired your work over the years, monitoring and supporting L&D performance through things like the benchmark and towards maturity, shows involved with, and other data gathering exercises, and the research you did for the CIPD. It's fair to say there's been a degree of frustration at L&D's resistance to meaningful change in that time. It's kind of come across. Do you see any sign of the ice breaking there? Is L&D changing, or is it inherently conservative, too willing to stay in its box? And that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. I mean, somebody has to hang on to the good stuff when there is change, but is it inherent in the character of L&D that it'll always be a little bit behind?
I've never been one who's wanted to complain at the industry. Other people have used my data to say, look at the lack of progress that you've done. But I'm always interested in the progresses that we have the potential to make. So I was constantly looking at the data and even working with the CIPD more recently, looking at different sets of data to say, okay, well, how can we step forward? Where is there an opportunity for us to actually drive more value? And I think that is the issue, is that we don't necessarily have a definition of what learning and development needs to be and do, our purpose, our why today.
Yeah.
Certainly in my own research, a lot of learning and development functions see themselves, and perhaps more importantly, their organizations see them as being the course, the catalogue, the curriculum, the calendar producers, the content. We produce things to help people do things differently, and producers. And a lot of us see ourselves in that space. And I think that where the frustration is that actually that doesn't drive business value. Producing all of those doesn't necessarily drive what's important to the business. So that's why we've got this tension and this frustration about how do we demonstrate that this piece of e-learning or this program has actually delivered value. We get all caught up in evaluation and ROI. We're trying to get that clear pass through. Whereas what I've also seen in the research, those that are actually able to deliver better business value probably have a different type of definition of what they do. and see themselves as possibly enablers of learning in the organisation rather than producers of learning for the organisation.
Yeah.
So where there's tension in not achieving those goals, what we're seeing there, I think, is more the issue of the old style of producer trying to prove themselves, whereas actually those that are enablers can actually work better in a messy environment, got more toolkits. So is there frustration? There's frustration, I think, that's by our own making and by our organisations making as well, because they still expect us to be producers, even when we want to become enablers. And I think that's where the tension is. So I'm never going to be irritated with our profession. I'm constantly looking for ways that each of us can step out, experiment, go under the wire, prove different ways of doing things. Because it's not just us that's holding ourselves back. It's the whole culture and our history that's holding us back as well, when we're defined in the past.
Yeah.
And yet we want to be part of the future.
Yeah. And in doing that, who would you advise people to look to? What for you are trusted kind of sources of knowledge and information driving the way forward for learning people now? Who do you look up to and follow?
Well, I was thinking about this, and actually, I don't want to be sycophantic here, but go ahead. But, really understanding the science behind people and behaviour change, I think, is absolutely critical, because the tools and the technologies, from my research, John, over the years, we've cracked everything as it's come in new, as it's got established, and it's never been the tool that's actually delivered the bottom line impact of the business. It's always been how we've used it. But when I've been unpicking the data more recently, it's those that use it in line with how people actually learn, how they remember, how they apply their knowledge. We've called it all kinds of things in the past: mobile learning, micro learning. We've called it social learning. But actually, it's the science behind the learning which will actually prepare us for the future. So, yes, I love your podcast with Don and all of those who are...
Those Great Minds on Learning.
Yeah, the Great Minds on Learning podcast. I love that. It stretches my thinking. When we are having to learn, we realise that it's difficult. So it helps us think about things in new ways. But that science of learning, and others like Lauren Waldron, like Amy Brand, Julie Dirksen is here looking at behavioural science as well, Stella Collins, Will Thalheimer. They are giving us the core principles from which to be able to operate. So they are really important for me at the moment, to get right back to the stuff that helps humans learn.
Yeah.
And the others, there's a couple of others that for me really stimulate my thinking as well, is I'm interested in talking to the practitioners who are struggling through and making change happen. As I said, talked about charities, but people who are doing their normal jobs, they are the inspiration, because they're making it work in their context and not from a platform in a conference. But in their context. And the others that I'm really keeping an eye on as well for inspiration, and the new generations coming through. Yep. So some fantastic communities bubbling up now with Lavinia, with Offbeat, Anna Maria, L&D Shakers, to have that fresh thinking. And I think it's really important that those established in the industry are willing to learn from different perspectives. Yeah. Because if we don't, we will become part of the history.
Yeah. I think some of the best people that we have on the Learning Hack are either the very, very young.
Yeah.
Like the 30 under 30 type people. And sometimes the very, very old, even older than me. People who've been around quite a while and in a way don't have any, they're not sponsored by anybody.
Yeah.
They've sold out their companies. They've got park off money in some cases and can kind of tell it like it is, and also take very much from mentioning Great Minds on Learning. The history of learning theory is really good. Just a interesting anecdote from my point of view. A while ago, I was thinking, well, Great Minds on Learning seems to be filling a need. Maybe wouldn't it be good to do a kind of overall book about it? But then I thought, no, there must be loads of them. So I kind of searched them up and looked at contents pages, and they were like they had kind of Gagne and 3 or 4 other very familiar kind of names that were from the training world. And you don't see much with a wider focus of psychology and behaviorism, behavioral psychology.
And the books needed to tie it all together, I think, potentially to say, actually, what does this mean today?
Yes.
What does it mean for you as a new person looking to move through this kind of disruptive, continually changing world? How do you apply this? How does it help you look for your tools and your technologies?
Yeah.
How does it help you identify the models that you're going to be needing to maybe follow or adapt in your own organization? So that's, for me, when I listen to the podcast, that's what gets all the little like neurons firing. It's like, oh, I wonder how that might help us. It's a different lens on the challenges that we're facing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And the challenges we need to face. We don't need to be facing the challenges of how do I get more people engaged with my content. That is not a helpful challenge. That's probably a role that can easily be given to AI. But how do I help somebody adapt for the future? Needs a more nuanced view of us on being able to understand that in language that we understand, rather than the academics. And I think that's so vital.
That's good. We'll do what we can. And you've done a huge amount in your career to move all this forward, and Laura, may you continue to do so. And thank you very much for taking the time today.
Well, thank you for stimulating our thinking. Appreciate it.
Hack Facts.
Maribel Reyes-Millán is Director for Digital Education, Technology and Innovation, Online and Distance Learning at Tecnológica de Monterrey, Mexico. She focuses on transforming learning experiences through technology integration, promoting accessibility and advancing digital skills, making significant contributions to Latin America's educational landscape. So it's great to have you on the podcast, Maribel. Welcome to the Learning Hack.
Thank you for inviting me here. I feel very pleased.
Good. I really enjoyed the session this morning and all the work that you shared that you do at Monterrey University.
Monterrey, yes.
Yeah. So the title of the talk today was about preparing for uncertain futures. What did you tell the audience about those uncertain futures and how to prepare for them?
Well, I think that the best way to be prepared or to face the uncertain future is to prepare for this uncertain future in many different ways. One of them is continuous upskilling and reskilling ourselves and keep continuous learning to attend to these kind of events like OEB, to learn what others are doing and to know other companies that are emerging and to learn from others and to be open to learn, to listen, to try to experiment with new technologies and pedagogies. And just continue learning. And on the other hand, I think that it's important to listen and understand what are the needs of our students, to understand their differences, to try to know more what is the audience that we attend, how the demographic is evolving in our countries in this population that we attend. So in this way, I think that we have to do that. And also, I think that it's very important that we, in an organization or in an institution, we define a strategy to be all aligned. I know that we don't know what will happen in 5 years, but we know that technology is evolving so fast. So we know that we have to move so fast in the use of technology. And also we know that our students need to enhance some kind of skills. The World Economic Forum from the last year says that the most important skills that students need are those about creativity, critical thinking, flexibility, resilience.
Yes.
So we can keep working on this.
Yeah. We don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. Technology, at the moment, in some technologies like AI, it's difficult to predict what will happen in 5 months, I think.
Yeah.
Do you think in these uncertain times that the more uncertain the times, the more we need events like this and to kind of compare notes from different sectors and different countries and so on, that the value increases in a way of this type of forum?
Yes, I think that this will increase with time, and we will be evolving so fast.
Yeah. I did a very bad thing there for an interviewer. I asked you a question that you can give me a yes/no answer to. Very bad practice, folks. So there have been a lot of worries expressed by educators since the explosion of interest. There was a lot of enthusiasm at the conference for AI and digital technology in general, but also a lot of worries, and especially the introduction of generative AI 2 years ago was kind of a big shock in a way. Where would you say people are now in their attitudes on a scale that reaches from ebullient enthusiasm to terror-stricken paralysis, maybe? I mean, particularly maybe in Mexico.
Maybe my point of view is a little biased because I work in a specific context. This is university, and my university. I think that my university and most of the professors that work here are very positive or enthusiastic with the use, not just of AI, the use of technology is part of what we do. But I don't say that we don't have fear professors. We have it in the same way that other universities. But I think that we have most that are leading the change and that they're motivating to others to try and to be training in the use of these new technologies.
Yeah. And how do you find it when you kind of reach out to your wider network? What do you feel the comparison is like?
Well, I think the most people that I know in Latin America are positive, and I keep working on help professor. Maybe we all experiment the different kind of problems with the anxiety of our teachers and
with the what?
Anxiety of our teachers, of the fear that they feel when they need to try new technologies, the AI. But this fear is because they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to use it. So we work to help them how to use it. And when you are using, you are feeling more comfortable. Yeah. And it's more easy that you adapt it.
So particularly with faculty rather than students, maybe.
No, yes, because the students are taking this kind of technologies faster than us.
And is there already?
Yeah. I have a son, and he always tell me the new things about ChatGPT or new technologies.
We call that reverse mentoring.
Yeah, reverse mentoring. Yeah.
Or just learning from your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had someone at a conference saying that they felt that the attitudes in the global south were more positive towards AI than in the perhaps more affluent north, because the more affluent north's got more to lose, and that people in the global south feel there's a lot to gain in terms of developing and stuff they can use. And that, do you think that's true at all?
Yeah, that we are going to gain with these technologies. Yes, I think so. I'm very positive on this. I like this phrase of the report of the UNESCO. I don't remember if it's from the last year, that says that the AI represents like a new beginning for the education.
Yeah,
something that could help us to reach those that can access with a good education. So I think I'm very positive. I know that we have to run a long way to reach those people And also we have to improve our internet connections or wherever. But it's a tool that can help us to enhance learning in many different ways. At the same way that this technology helps in medicine and in other industries, it's just the way that we use it. We can just use for good or for bad, and we can decide it.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you shared about the work that you're doing at Monterey? Because I thought that was very inspiring.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, at Tec de Monterrey, we're working in several ways. Tec de Monterrey has a new educational model of education since 2019. We changed to challenge-based learning, and we are all very connected with the industry because our students have to solve challenge since they start college. So at the end of college, maybe they almost solve like 50 challenges from different industries because they are real challenges. But also we are now redesigning our educational programs for 2026, and digital education is part of this educational model. So we are integrating by design and with a very structured manner the way that we use technology in our classroom, how we can enhance with digital learning experiences, the student's journey, the face-to-face courses, and also the courses that can be taught in online or blended modalities. So we are working on this, and when all this in a planned manner. So we have a plan. We have different projects ongoing. Some of them about how to enhance the competencies of our professors. Some of them in the pedagogical and technological trends, and in another way, how to include some policies, regulations, how we can communicate to our faculty the new things, training, advising. It's more or less that we are doing.
It's really good to hear about. This conference, Online Educa, is a bit unique in the way it brings together the worlds of workplace learning and education. I don't think there's another conference exhibition of this kind of scale and standing that does that. My perception, having been on both sides of the fence, is education and workplace learning. They're kind of different worlds. They share a lot of common platforms, certainly a lot of common technology. And your attitudes to tech seem to be very different in uses in those worlds. What would you say each of those two worlds could learn from each other?
Well, both can learn from each other. We must be open, or both parts need to be open to hear what others are doing. We have to be curious about what they are doing, and also try to make connections and to work together to try to understand more what the others are doing. Sometimes the industry moves so fast in the use of technology. No, the universities, I think that we're trying to do it at the same way, but not. Maybe if we work together, we could achieve more things, or we can help each other.
Yeah. And how important are partnerships with companies outside the university or with other universities important to your strategy and plans for digital learning?
For digital learning, you said, or in general?
Yeah, partnerships, because several of the other people on the platform shared partnerships they had with people like OpenAI and...
Well, we don't have any special partnership. We work with different companies. We have a lot of partnerships with companies, but for the challenge-based learning of our students. Yes, a lot of companies where they can develop their skills and competencies, but not specifically in technology.
Right. Okay. And closing out, so I don't want to hold you too long, getting towards the end of the conference. I think we're all looking forward to it finishing. Who do you follow and look up to in learning and learning technology? Who would you recommend as a good source?
Good source. Well, I like to follow some persons. For example, Paul LeBlanc,
right,
ex-former president from New Hampshire, Southern New Hampshire University.
Yeah,
I think that he is a very good leader in this area. I also follow Cristobal Cobo.
Yeah.
This Latin American is Chile, and he's from Chile. And well, I like to follow some higher education podcasts.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to follow your podcast.
Of course, the Learning Hack.
Yeah.
Listen, yeah. Well, that's true. And thank you very much for sharing all that with us today and taking the time today.
Okay, thank you for having me here. Thank you very much. Nice to meet.
Good to hear.
Hack Facts.
Donald H. Taylor is an influential figure in workplace learning and chair of the Learning Technologies Conference. A respected writer, speaker and facilitator, he explores trends in learning and development, particularly the intersection of technology and human skills and AI. So it's great to have you on the podcast again.
Always good to be here.
One-time friend of the podcast. Welcome to the Learning Hack. Your GSS survey. You asked the question, what's going to be hot in 2024, back last January. You said that AI was going to be not only hot, but scorching hot, on fire, in fact. Was it?
It was completely absurdly hot in ways that were unprecedented in the history of the survey. Going back to 2016, when we started tracking numbers properly with large numbers of respondents, the number one option got between 13 and 10.5% for all those years. Last year, AI got 21.5%, which is so far ahead of anything historically. Yeah. And it was number one in every one of the major geographies. So this is not something that's been driven by the US, as you might expect. Possibly it is across the world. Everyone is talking about AI.
Yeah, and it is kind of the global sentiment survey.
Indeed.
So what exactly happened with AI and L&D in 2024? Okay, it was hot, but apart from the GSS survey, you're also involved with some research with Egla.
Yes.
Egla Vinelskaita, in researching how people have been using it.
Yeah.
So what's the story so far in this year?
Well, it's very interesting because we've done these 3 reports starting on the anniversary of the launch of ChatGPT, and then 2 more reports looking at, firstly, where on earth were we 1 year after GPT? And the answer was most people weren't using, actually not most people, but a surprising number of people who responded to the survey, 45% of employers, weren't using AI. And this is a self-selecting sample. So these are people who chose to answer the survey, were excited by AI, but still weren't actually using it. We've shifted from that to where it's something like 83% of people are using AI. 83%, of respondents to the survey are using AI in the most recent survey, which was published in October of this year, 2024. That's a shift. But when you look at how they're using it and what they're using it for, it's very largely for content production or administrative improvements in efficiency. Now, that's one tranche of uses. The other tranche of uses is reflected in the case studies we have in these reports, or at least in the second and third reports. And those reports show that there are some sophisticated uses of AI. But there is no causal link between starting to use AI, typically generative AI, to produce content, to going on to use it for these more sophisticated implementations.
Yes, it's very hard to put a maturity kind of model around that. And I know you had a crack at this and other people had a go as well. And I think we should also say, one thing that's been clear to me over the year is that just because people are using it for content production, that doesn't necessarily mean it's an unsophisticated use, because there's a case study that we did at the Performance Journey conference from Ermelo, from this Dutch company, which is about performance support, right? Using AI, which strictly speaking is content production. They're getting them knowledge out of the SMEs or bypassing the SMEs in some cases, and it's kind of text-based in order to have a performance support system that works via AI through generative AI and so on. So it isn't necessarily mean. Mm-hmm. It's hard, that maturity. So
I would say that that is a performance support tool. It happens to use content to support the performance.
Yeah.
It starts with the aim of doing the performance support, whereas there's a great deal of use of AI in order to just produce courses or learning content faster, which is something which is different. So if your aim is performance support or indeed anything else, certainly content may be a part of it, but that's not the end point. The end point is the performance support.
Yeah.
So yes, Egler and I produced this thing which we call the immaturity model to try to make the point that there is no natural progression between stages in the use of AI, and also to highlight the fact that there's a risk of remaining with what we would call an immature use, which is a use which is centered on the internal functions of the L&E department.
Where it's just replacing something that you did before.
Exactly. It's what I call boombox stuff.
Yeah.
You start with a transistor radio, and then you have a boombox, which has exactly the same functionality. It's just louder and bigger.
Yeah.
Great, you can do that, but it's not a substantive qualitative change in what you're doing. It's just bigger and louder.
And it looks cooler as well if you're Africa Bambaataa, you've got it over your shoulder in the spike leaf.
I could never carry off the whole boombox look.
I certainly couldn't. So I'm not going to ask you to preempt the results of this year's GXS.
Thank you.
Because I know I won't get anywhere. For which you're only just beginning to gather data.
Now, I'm actually beginning to gather data now, quietly doing a bit of a first week of surveying, and we're launching it properly on the very first Monday of December. So yes, it will be out.
But what would you expect to see?
So you said you weren't going to ask me what was going to happen, and you just asked me. That's very cheeky.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between a guess, or, we have our kind of initial kind of rough guess at something, and then the data turns that over or confirms it, whatever, and if we've got a fight.
I'll tell you what the question is that I have in my mind, all right? AI knocked it out of the park for the 2024 survey. The question is, will that continue in 2025? Usually, people have a list of 16 things, right? And I usually take one off and put a new one on so that people can have something new to look at. I haven't done that this year. AI skewed the data so much in 2024 that I'm just giving people exactly the same list. And I want to see what's changed in people's perception. Now, if AI stays at the top, we can then look at the rest of the table and say, well, okay, given that AI is dominating people's thinking, what's happening elsewhere? We've seen a shift in the past 5 years towards a much more data-driven, I say data-supported, data-driven view. So things like analytics, personalization have risen up the table. Things like communal learning and, delivery mechanisms have dropped down the table. It would be interesting to see if the options are the same in 24 and 25. How does the rest of the table shift? Whatever happens to be at number one, which is probably going to be AI.
Be interesting to see what happens to skills, for instance, which has been a big area.
Skills has been huge. So for 3 years, it was number one, and it was knocked off by AI, reskilling and upskilling. Will that stay there, or will it fall away? My guess is it will stay being very highly popular.
Yeah, I mean, you still hear quite a bit of talk about it, although it's becoming called the skills obsession.
Well, that's a Charles Jennings phrase, isn't it?
Charles Jennings, which is kind of an indicator that perhaps, the focus is a bit unhealthy and not all that helpful necessarily.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think Charles has got something there. I think the idea that skills represent everything that is important about someone in terms of, never mind their humanity, but in terms of just their productivity, is dangerous. We know that performance is a function of many things. Knowledge and ability, yes, but also the environment somebody's in, their degree of motivation. Now, the environment and the motivation are not matters for skills. They are very important. They lie outside that. But if we persuade the higher ups in an organization that skills are what matter, and they do matter, but if we persuade them they are all that matters, we ignore those other things that are crucial to success. And we might put people who are highly skilled in a demotivating milieu, or in an environment where they just can't get the job done. Doesn't matter what your skills are in that case. You have to look at the people as a whole, you have to look at the environment as a whole.
Yeah. I think I'd talked to somebody this year who said that, I'm asking this very question, is there any just competencies dressed up with a name? And they said, well, no. I mean, the shift from competencies to skills, because it's a bit more granular, isn't so much about roles, has enabled companies to be much more flexible in the way they look at things. And that had never occurred to me. Perhaps because I'm stupid, I don't know. But I think of something that's occurred to me has occurred to other people as well, because of the podcasts and so on. So I think that's an interesting one. So I'd expect to see it still around.
I think what we're seeing with the idea of skills as it's being used at the moment is this sense that jobs are a collection of tasks which may be related to each other or may not be, and tasks require skills, which, as you say, are more granular than the idea of competencies. And the idea is now, thanks to AI, and there are some great tools out there, it's possible to say what skills you have and therefore what tasks you can do, and be much more nimble about assigning people who contain these tasks, who contain these skills, to jobs that contain the tasks, and to break up jobs. So you have the idea of fractional chief marketing officers, fractional chief financial officers. No reason that shouldn't be extended to other jobs as well. And if you look at marketing, very often if you recruit somebody as a marketer in an organization, they may be the only person or one of a few people doing marketing. And if they're the only person, they are expected to write great copy, have a good visual sense, be able to analyze data, and also be tremendously artistically creative. Now, that's a really rich and wide collection of things, and some people are great at all of them. But there's no reason why one person should do all of those. What you might want is a fifth skill, which is the ability to find other people who could do each one of those different tasks very well.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting reflection, because, of course, my background is in marketing, and I did find out that in departments there are people who are very data-driven, people who are more creatively kind of able, like yourself, and they're the better bullshitters, so very often end up with the director job. And should be so cynical about marketing. So that's an interesting perspective, but it is a very wide kind of skill set that's involved there.
And many jobs will have a similarly wide skill set. There's no reason why they shouldn't be not one job, but a series of tasks carried out by different people.
Yeah. It's interesting, because I've been talking today to people about podcasting for learning, which seems to be starting to be kind of on fire as well as an interest, since the room's so packed. And the skills issue is interesting because, do you need to get in an audio engineer? Do you need to get in a graphic designer and things like this? A lot of the skills you need are actually in your organization, but people have side hustles or, or they're quite lowly in the organization, but in their spare time, they're making records. Your kids have got the same technology in their bedrooms as Billie Eilish has to make records.
Right.
And it's not that this hasn't occurred to that generation. So that a lot of these skills are floating around there, but they might be a bit hard to detect because they're not on the work side of the brain. They're on the, this is fun and I'm going to be a superstar.
And this is why, if you've got a skills system in your workplace, it's really important to try to gather widely. Now, you don't want to ask people to assess against 100 different skills. It's going to take forever. But it is important to get what their core skills are, but also other things that they are passionate about. If you can do that as well, you're going to capture some real diamonds in the rough. And, of course, one thing that's really useful to capture as language is people always underestimate the value of, or the breadth of depth of languages in an organization. And there's the story of one skills platform being used in order to find the guy who knew what had to be done when you were transporting horses by aeroplane. It was a particular airport and you had to find somebody who knew about this stuff. Otherwise the aircraft can't take off. So in that situation, you need to have that particular skill set and you need to be able to track the person down.
Yeah, interesting. We only have you for a short time though, so I should crack on and ask you about what you learned from this morning's session which you chaired on strategic L&D, while I was off doing something no doubt less interesting.
I led the session, I facilitated it, trying to make the link between the strategy, this is where we're trying to get to, and the tactics, this is how we do it. And I was trying to make the point to the audience that the two go hand in hand, starting with the quote from Omar Bradley, from who's the guy in charge of the beach at D-Day, which is amateurs talk about strategy, professionals talk about logistics. And the three speakers were great, but all came back to the same point, which is whatever your strategy is, you need to be talking to the stakeholders and to the people who do the work. And there needs to be a constant line of communication to find out what needs to be done, to make sure that it's done, and to make sure that it carries on being done and implemented properly in terms of learning or anything else. So for me, it all comes down to communication, which is not just telling people, but also the listening side of it as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've been in a lot of strategy sessions, but one of the most interesting and surprising was a very highly paid American strategic consultant. I was amazed at how tactical it was. Yeah. All about what you're going to do tomorrow, what you're going to do next month. And people are a bit kind of,
we pay all this money for...
Yeah, I was hoping I was going to get here and drink coffee for an hour. Yeah. So you're in a pretty unique position to spot the speakers and gurus here at the OEB conference. People from all over the world, all kind of both sides of the fence, both workplace learning and education. So you see the important voices that people are listening to, and we're getting the ear of learning people. Who are the important voices you think we should listen out for in 2025?
I'm cautious about pointing to particular people.
Yeah.
I'd prefer to talk to particular topics, if that's all right.
Okay.
Because I think the thing about the people is it's invidious. If I say Ms. A, then Mr. B will be disaffected.
Yeah.
For me, there are topics which are obvious. AI, how do we use it? There are some great people talking about that at the moment. So actually, to give you some names, obviously, Egla Binarskaita, Ross Stevenson, Josh Cavalier, Dr. Philippa Hardman, and so on. These are people who are talking about the practical side of using AI. Okay. In addition to that, I think going beyond AI and its immediate application, we're looking now at being able to harness data about the workforce in ways that we haven't been able to in the past. So for me, organizational network analysis remains one key tool, one key area that we should be looking at, because that enables us to understand what the real networking connections are in the organization and who are the key people who make a difference to getting things done and transferring knowledge and enthusiasm. There's about 3% of people you need to get on board in order to make a change in an organization. That will help you. Organizational network analysis will help you find out who those 3% of people are.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Another thing I'd definitely say is worth looking at for the future is coaching. Nothing new about that, but coaching is going to be supported hugely by technology, data and AI in the coming year. And I've been following that since about 2018. There's no question that is a space that you need to be tracking.
And I'm hearing more conversations about that.
Yeah. I think people are finally waking up to the fact that this is not a choice between a robot or a human being.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum of things in the middle, and against that you have to have an axis where you're considering what's the risk factor. If something goes wrong, how serious is it? If it's super serious, then you've got to have a human being involved.
Yeah.
If it's something that is purely tactical, then maybe you don't need a person involved, and what you need is a coach, an artificial coach, just providing lots of practice. There is a spectrum, as I say, and another dimension, which is the risk involved.
Right. So lastly, what's your reflection on the OEB conference this year? It's a 30th year.
Yep.
You've been involved in that for a while?
I don't know how long for.
Not as long as some of the people here.
No, I mean, we've got people here like Charles and others who've been involved since the very beginning.
Full back sea shows talking to you.
I would say my reflection is that most shows, exhibitions or conferences, do not last 30 years.
Yeah.
So why has this survived so long? And I think it's a bit of luck. Being based in Berlin puts it at the center of Europe, and people come in from all over Europe, and that draws people in from further afield, Asia, Africa, and the States. But luck isn't enough. Beyond that, You've got superb organisation which pulls people together to have open, sometimes very frank discussion about what's right, what's wrong in our field, and across different sectors. It's the only one that pulls in people from HE and the workplace together.
Yeah.
So being able to do that, having that rich mixture of people and a framework that has people mingling in the corridors, having quite long breaks, and a bar where people are meeting in the evenings, which is the natural gathering point, means that there's this constantly refreshing series of conversations going on. And that is always what a great conference is about, pulling the right people together and letting them get on with the conversation.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to use a cliche that I always use, but I am. It takes many sticks to make a fire. Yeah, that always goes down well. Thank you very much, Don. Thanks for taking the time.
Always a pleasure, John. Always.
That's all on the Learning Hack podcast for this time. The Learning Hack is completely independent and transparently funded by sponsorship. If you want to help others find us, please like, follow, rate, review, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice or on YouTube.
The Learning Hack is among the top 5% of shows most listened to globally, according to Listen Notes. And if you think your organisation could benefit from sponsoring the Learning Hack, or from using our knowledge and resources to start your own learning podcast, you can contact me on john@learninghackpodcasts.com. Until next time.
Stay curious, learning people.
Now I finally get it.